I have full confidence in Catherine and William. Their judgment is sound, their loyalty unquestioned.
The room did not erupt at first. It went silent. King Charles had made difficult choices before, but this announcement landed like a royal earthquake. Camilla sat motionless, unable to answer, while Anne's name echoed through the chamber with impossible weight. In one sudden declaration, Charles shifted the future of the monarchy, placing Anne beside the crown, William and Catherine at the centre of power, and Harry and Meghan outside the royal frame. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew every person in that room understood the weight of what was coming. He did not soften it. He announced that Anne would be elevated as Queen Consort, a royal title meaning the monarch's formal partner in public duty and symbolic service. He then confirmed that William and Catherine would assume commanding authority over the monarchy's active responsibilities, while Harry and Meghan would hold no official role in its future structure. The Royal Council, a closed gathering where senior figures discussed major crown decisions, had expected a routine succession briefing. Instead, the king delivered a historic reversal that made every breath in the chamber feel dangerous. Camilla did not move. She did not speak. Her fingers tightened around the arm of her chair, as the meaning of Charles's words settled over her. This was not a small reduction of influence. This was replacement. The Queen Consort had spent years standing beside him, believing her place was secure. Yet in one sentence, the king had moved the emotional centre of the crown away from her and toward Anne. Camilla looked at Charles as if waiting for him to correct himself, but he did not. He simply placed a signed royal directive on the table. A formal written command used to record and enforce a sovereign decision. The sound of paper against polished wood felt final. Anne stayed still, but stillness did not mean calm. The Princess Royal understood the burden hidden inside the honour. She had never chased the crown's softer comforts, and now the king was asking her to carry its hardest judgment. William turned toward Catherine for only a second, but that controlled glance revealed everything. The prince knew power had moved toward them faster than expected. Catherine knew the same power would come with wounds, enemies, and a public test neither of them could avoid. Across the room, Harry and Meghan's absence suddenly felt louder than any objection they could have made. Charles let the silence stand because he needed everyone to feel it. The monarch had not made a passing emotional statement. He had prepared this moment, signed it, and delivered it before witnesses. Camilla finally lowered her eyes, not in surrender, but in shock. Anne breathed slowly. William held his posture. Catherine understood the next battle had already begun. But before the palace could understand the decision, it had to face the people whose lives had just been rewritten in a single sentence. Every royal decision has a public face, but this one had private wounds beneath it. Charles was not simply rearranging titles. He was choosing trust over tradition, duty over comfort, and stability over sentiment. Camilla felt discarded. Anne felt burdened. William felt the pressure of inheritance arrive early. Catherine felt the gaze of the entire institution turned toward her, and far from the centre, Harry and Meghan were being erased from the official future. Charles understood the crown could no longer survive on blurred lines. The monarchy needed a structure strong enough to face scandal, family division, and public doubt without collapsing into another argument behind palace doors. The crown, in plain terms, meant more than jewels or ceremony. It meant the whole weight of royal duty, public trust, and national expectation. The king had watched that weight become unstable. He had seen how every uncertain role created fresh tension, and how every unresolved wound gave the public another reason to question the family's strength. Anne became the name Charles trusted most because she had never treated service like a prize. The Princess Royal had spent a lifetime showing discipline, endurance, and loyalty without demanding the centre of the room. That was why her new position cut so deeply into Camilla's pride. The Queen Consort did not only feel replaced, she felt exposed. Charles had not warned her privately. He had made the choice in front of the family, and that made the humiliation sharper than the title itself. William carried his own pain in silence. The prince knew that accepting greater power meant stepping further into duty, but it also meant stepping further away from Harry. His brother's removal was no longer a cold family distance. It was now part of the monarchy's official direction. Meghan's name carried the same final weight because her absence from future royal operations was not temporary. It was permanent. The future king understood that power had arrived with grief attached to it. Catherine noticed what others almost missed. The Princess of Wales saw the royal directive resting on the table, with a second sealed page beneath it. A royal directive was a signed instruction from the monarch, and this one clearly held more than the first announcement. Her eyes moved briefly toward Charles, then toward William, and the prince understood her concern before she spoke. There were consequences still hidden inside that page. Camilla looked at Charles then, not with confusion, but with warning. The Queen Consort had been wounded in public, and everyone in the room could feel that she would not accept that wound quietly. Anne stayed composed. William stayed guarded. Catherine stayed alert. And the reason Charles reached this breaking point was buried in a moment the palace had tried desperately to forget. The announcement did not come from nowhere. Behind it stood one ceremony, one conversation, and one mistake that could never be undone. Weeks earlier, at a private Windsor service meant to honour royal continuity, Camilla made a demand that stunned Charles and wounded Anne. It was not loud enough for the public to hear. But inside the palace, that moment became the trigger everyone later recognised as the point of no return. Camilla had entered that day believing her place beside Charles could not be challenged. The private Windsor service was meant to honour royal continuity, meaning the smooth passing of duty, trust, and public responsibility from one generation to the next. It should have shown unity. It should have reminded the family that the crown was bigger than old wounds. Instead, the Queen Consort turned a sacred moment into a test of influence, and Charles heard something in her words that he could not forget. Anne stood close enough to hear the demand clearly. Camilla asked that the Princess Royal be removed from the final family procession and that William and Catherine's growing duties be reviewed before any future public confirmation. The words were calm, but their meaning was brutal. Anne understood at once that this was not about ceremony. This was about control. The final family procession, a formal closing walk used to show unity before senior household witnesses, was supposed to place service above rivalry. By trying to exclude Anne from it, Camilla exposed exactly how deep the rivalry had become. Charles felt the betrayal before he answered. The king had defended Camilla through storms, criticism, and years of public resistance. But this demand cut through all of that history. She was asking him to weaken Anne, question William, and slow Catherine at the exact moment the monarchy needed steady hands. The monarch did not shout. He simply looked at the Queen Consort long enough for the silence to become an accusation. Camilla noticed it. Anne noticed it. William and Catherine noticed it too. Charles acted after the service ended. He privately requested old household records, documents that tracked royal service, attendance, discipline, public trust, and years of visible duty. The request was later noted in a documented account prepared for senior advisors, and that account made one thing clear. The king was no longer judging feelings. He was measuring loyalty. The file placed Anne near the top for consistency, while William and Catherine appeared as the clearest future centre of stability. Harry and Meghan, by contrast, stood outside the active structure Charles believed the crown now required. Charles read the final page alone. He removed his glasses, set them down, and said nothing for a long time. In that silence, the decision began forming. By the time Camilla realised that ceremony had changed Charles, the confrontation she feared was already waiting behind closed doors. Camilla did not raise her voice at first. That made the moment more dangerous. Behind a closed door, away from aides and royal language, she asked Charles whether he truly understood what he had done. Charles did not look away. On the table between them lay the directive, the sealed page, and the cold reality that their private marriage had now collided with the survival of the crown. Camilla wanted an answer, not ceremony. She asked why Anne had been named Queen Consort, and why William and Catherine had been handed practical power over the monarchy's future direction. The Queen Consort, in plain terms, was the public partner expected to stand beside the monarch in duty, unity, and national symbolism. To Camilla, Charles had not only changed a role, he had broken a promise in front of the family, and he had done it with the calm of a man who had already accepted the damage. Charles kept his voice low because anger would have made the truth easier to dismiss. He told Camilla that love could not be allowed to outrank duty. The words struck harder than any accusation. The king had defended her for years, but now he was saying the crown demanded a choice she could not win. Camilla accused him of humiliating her before Anne, before William, before Catherine, and before every silent witness in that council room. Charles answered that the monarchy had already been humiliated by years of private division, and he would not let that division become its future. Camilla stepped closer to the table, but the directive remained between them like a wall. A royal directive was a signed command from the sovereign, created to make a decision official inside the palace structure. Charles then pointed to the sealed second page and revealed, through a recorded private conversation later preserved in household notes, that it gave William and Catherine authority over future royal appearances, patronage strategy, and family representation. The prince would guide the visible future. The Princess of Wales would stand beside him as more than support. Together, they would become the working centre of the crown. Charles did not stop there. He confirmed that Harry and Meghan would not be restored to any active royal function. The Duke would remain family, but not a royal operator. The Duchess would remain outside official palace duty, with no ceremonial return planned. Camilla heard the finality in his voice and understood that this was not a warning. It was already done. Camilla left without bowing her head. The Queen Consort carried her pride out of the room, but Charles noticed her copy of the directive still lying on the table. That abandoned document would soon reveal that the decision was not only emotional, it was backed by power. Camilla could no longer reach. The monarchy does not move on feeling alone. Behind every royal announcement stands a hidden structure of signatures, household authority, council, and consent. Charles had not acted impulsively. He had built a pathway, and at the centre of that pathway was not Camilla, not Harry, not Meghan, but Anne's record of service and William and Catherine's rising command over the institution's future image. Charles had prepared the ground before anyone understood the full danger. Senior advisors had built a royal framework, a written plan that sets out who carries official duties, who represents the crown, and who holds authority inside the palace structure. The king needed that framework because confusion had become a threat. Every unclear role invited another public argument. Every half-open door to Harry and Meghan created fresh uncertainty. Every private wound around Camilla risked becoming a national crisis. Anne read the supporting file without celebration. A senior courtier watched her face change as resistance gave way to solemn acceptance. The Princess Royal understood why Charles had chosen her, and that made the burden heavier, not lighter. She was being placed beside him as the symbolic stabilizer, the person whose record of service could quiet doubts when emotions ran wild. Anne had not asked for that role. Yet the file showed what the king needed everyone to see. Years of discipline, loyalty, attendance, and restraint had become more powerful than charm, popularity, or personal closeness. William felt the weight differently. The prince stood over a responsibility note, a formal acknowledgement confirming his place in the new working order, and each signature seemed to pull him further from Harry. The future king knew his brother was still family, but the framework made something painfully clear. Family status did not equal royal function. Harry's name appeared under personal relation, not monarchy operations. Meghan's name appeared only in an exclusion clause, a section used to define who would not return to official duty. That single detail ended years of palace uncertainty. Catherine noticed the room tighten when the final page was brought forward. The Princess of Wales understood strategy, but she also understood consequence. William could carry power, and she could stand beside him, but neither of them could ignore what this would do to Camilla. Catherine quietly asked whether the Queen Consort had been formally informed of the final page. The question changed the room because it exposed the one danger no advisor could control: humiliation. Charles did not answer quickly. The king looked towards the sealed document and understood that power had now moved beyond emotion. Anne accepted the burden. William accepted the duty. Catherine saw the wound coming. When that final page reached Camilla, the fallout began with a silence more painful than shouting. There are moments when a palace does not need raised voices to feel shattered. A door closes, a telephone stops ringing, a name disappears from a schedule. Camilla felt the new reality first in the smallest details, and that made it crueler. Her private office received revised instructions. Her appearances were reduced. Her position beside Charles remained visible, but the power behind it had moved elsewhere. Camilla read the revised household schedule twice before she understood the full insult. Anne's name now appeared beside Charles at the most important ceremonial moments, while William and Catherine were marked to lead the monarchy's major public functions. A household schedule, in simple terms, is the palace plan, showing who attends, leads, and represents the crown at official events. This one told the truth without raising its voice. The Queen Consort would still be seen, but she would no longer shape the centre of royal power. Camilla placed the paper flat on the desk as if refusing to let her hand shake. Her office had once moved with quiet confidence, but now even the smallest instruction felt like a warning. A call that should have come to her was redirected. A briefing that once required her approval was sent elsewhere. The Queen Consort sat alone, wounded by the silence around her, because the silence proved everyone already knew. Charles had not only made a decision, the king had allowed the palace to act on it immediately. Catherine felt the cost when she saw the changes reach Camilla. The Princess of Wales accepted the duty, but she did not mistake duty for victory. She understood that every new responsibility placed on her and William came with pain attached to someone else. The prince felt it too. He saw Harry and Meghan removed from future palace planning documents, with no reserved space for ceremonial return or active representation. A planning document, meaning the internal palace record for future royal duties, had turned family distance into official fact. Anne gave her first instruction with the restraint that made Charles trust her. The Princess Royal asked that no public triumph be shown, only order and restraint. She understood that her rise would look brutal if handled with pride, and she refused to let the crown appear hungry for humiliation. Anne's calm made the shift more powerful, because she treated the honour like a burden, not a reward. Charles made one final move himself. A palace aide noticed that Harry and Meghan had been removed from a private consultation list by the king's own hand, not by staff. That detail changed everything. William heard it and asked to speak with Charles alone, knowing one private conversation might decide whether this new structure healed the crown or broke the family further. In that private meeting, father and son finally spoke without titles standing between them. For once, the room did not feel like a throne room. It felt like a father facing the son who would inherit every consequence of his choices. Charles stood near the desk, tired but steady. William entered with no speech prepared. Between them was the monarchy, but beneath it was something older and more painful. Family, loyalty, disappointment, and the terrible cost of choosing the crown over blood. Charles did not begin with a command. He began with silence because he knew William had come not as an heir demanding authority, but as a son searching for the truth. No aides stood nearby. No private secretary softened the words. An heir, in plain terms, is the person expected to inherit the throne and carry the crown's future responsibilities. The prince already understood duty, but this was different. This decision touched Harry, Meghan, Camilla, Anne, Catherine, and every wound the family had tried to keep beneath the surface. William asked whether the announcement was truly final. The question did not come from weakness. It came from grief. The future king knew Anne's elevation would steady the monarchy, and he knew Catherine's new authority would strengthen the working centre of the crown. But he also knew Harry would hear the decision as rejection. Meghan would see it as a locked door, and Camilla would feel it as public defeat. The prince needed to know whether Charles had chosen this after anger or after judgment. Charles lowered his eyes for the first time. The king admitted he had waited too long to draw a line, and that confession carried both regret and steel. He said the family had been allowed to confuse affection with function for too many years. Royal function, meaning the official work and representation done on behalf of the crown, could no longer be treated as a place for unresolved pain. William listened without interrupting, because the monarch was not defending himself now. He was admitting the cost. William spoke carefully about Harry. The prince said exclusion from monarchy power did not have to mean hatred inside the family. Charles heard the plea beneath the words, and the king understood that William was still protecting a brother even while accepting a crown-shaped burden. Then Charles revealed why he had chosen Anne. He said she would never use the title for herself, and that made the Princess Royal the safest person to hold it. William accepted the new authority only on one condition. Catherine had to be treated as heirs.